today, Spencer Callaghan, accompanied by Rich Matakaitis, will be providing business perspectives from both CIRA and Shopify's perspectives, and answering questions along the way that you are welcome to pose through the chat function. So let's dive right in. I'd like to take the opportunity to virtually introduce you all to Spencer Callaghan, the Communication and Content Manager from CIRA, hey Spencer, which is the .ca domain registry. And he's accompanied by Rich Matakaitis, the Retail Development Representative at Shopify, who's going to be bringing to life some additional comments and providing really that business perspective as we see businesses shift to building online. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Spencer, to kick things off. Please ask questions through the chat function, everyone, and we'll get to them hopefully throughout the duration of this 1-hour session. Over to you, Spencer. I think you're muted, but let's unmute.
There we go. I always do that. Like it's without fail.
I know.
Like without fail, I forget to unmute. Thanks a lot, Kayla. Really appreciate your intro, and thanks for inviting us. Thanks to Rich for being here. Yeah, I mean, we're here today to talk about, does your business need a website in 2020? And some people might be saying that's a bit of a crazy question, but I really think it's interesting to dive into it because a lot has changed in terms of that equation. And so the short answer to the question of whether or not your business needs a website in 2020 is yes. And then the long answer, also yes, but we'll explain more. And before we get started, we have a little game we want to play. If everyone can take a look at our website bingo, and in the chat, put the letters of each one you've done before in the chat, so that we get an idea of what level of experience everyone has, what everyone has done in terms of running or creating a website. So just add the letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I to the chat, corresponding to whatever applies to you.
I think we just need to also share your screen very quickly, Spencer, because we're seeing your beautiful face.
Oh my goodness. The wonders of technology.
Exactly.
There we go.
You got it.
All right, so let's start that again because it was really clever and you guys missed it. So does your business need a website in 2020? The short answer, yes. The long answer, also yes, but we'll explain more. And this is the bingo I was talking about that you could not see. And if you want to just put in the chat to give us an idea of, where your organization or where you are at personally, that'd be super helpful. Okay, so we have some with a little bit of experience, some with not very much. And so really, at the end of the day, what we're trying to find out here is just what level, and Lauren has a lot of experience, I can see, because obviously websites are not new. And so some people have varying levels of experience with building them, running them, or even interacting with them. Okay. So continue to fill those out in the chat in the next minute or two, if you like. Just a little intro about me. My name is Spencer Callaghan. I'm a digital media and communications professional, been in the industry for 15 years. I'm the communications and content manager at CIRA, and we're the nonprofit that manages the .ca domain name. So let's talk a little bit about how websites have changed. Here is a brand that has a great .ca domain name, gracedesign.ca. And you can see this is what their website looked like in 2002. And I don't know how many of you, how old everybody is, but if you remember 2002, this is pretty accurate. It's probably good for 2002, but compared to today's designs, it's not necessarily modern. And here's what they look like today. In 2020, they have an integrated e-commerce platform built into their website. It's actually a Shopify website. I planned that. And you can just see the transformation in just a little under 20 years and how much has changed. And so let's talk about websites in 2020. So 40 to 50% of Canadian businesses still don't have a website. And those stats, I think, every time I read them, they blow me away a little bit. And there's various different sources that have reported that over the years. Canada is lagging even compared to the United States in terms of businesses with a website. But we recently ran a survey of our own, asking Canadian business owners about their whether or not they had a website. And these were the results. And so about 50% of Canadian businesses said they had a website. 21% said they didn't have one, but were planning to build one. And 30% said they had no plans to build a website. So that actually matches really well with the 40 to 50% number, as right here, it's about 50-50 who either have one or don't have one in 2020. And of course, the interesting stat that we found out was 37% say that COVID-19 is the reason they're building a website. And so, that has been a major shift in the industry that I think we're going to talk a little bit about later on. So, do you need a website? So we're going to talk about a few different things. First of all, we're going to talk about what do your customers want? What do they expect? What are their expectations in 2020 in terms of whether or not you have a website? Then we're going to talk a little bit about what the website's purpose is in a complete digital strategy, and how central it is and how it functions in that strategy. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about how to build one, or how to get one is probably a better way to put it. And here's another really interesting stat. 87% of shoppers search online before buying. And this means that virtually every purchase a customer makes is started with some type of digital touch point. And this includes local searches. So if you're looking for a barber or to get your shoes shined, and physical services, a dentist, hairdresser, etc. So it's not just about e-commerce, and it's not just about digital goods. So let's look at our customer and see from their point of view how they start a search and how they find something. So let's say that this customer is looking for cookies, because who doesn't like cookies? So they go to Google and they search for cookies nearby. And this is what they see. And if your business doesn't have a digital footprint, it will not show up on here. And again, it doesn't matter if the cookies are virtual or digital, or if they're actual cookies with chocolate chips. You have to have a website presence to show up in these environments. And whether you shine shoes or knit tiny sweaters for ferrets, it doesn't matter. Customers search for products that they want and goods and services that they want, and it starts online. We're going to talk a little bit about the customer journey here. So this is a really great graphic that I picked up online that explains it really well. And I won't get into all of this, but basically what we're talking about here is that the journey towards buying something starts with awareness. And the majority of that awareness starts with the customer interacting with your brand online, either through search or through some other means, whether it be social media or whatever. And then they eventually convert to a sale. And the key part of that conversion is your website. That's where they go to buy, or if they're buying in person, it's where they go to get the information before they walk into your store. And so it's critical that that website be a part of that journey. The thing to remember here is, a lot of people talk about word of mouth, and well, my business is word of mouth, so I don't need a website. Imagine someone recommends a business at a party, and you go home and you probably forget about it for a few days. Then you remember and decide you want to do a search for it, but you don't quite remember the name. You might have got a bit of a piece of it. You might generally know what it was about. What you're going to do at that point is you're going to search. And so in that particular situation, it just goes to show how even a word of mouth reference often requires a digital touch point in order to convert into a sale. And of course, text-based search is only part of the equation. And so one of the things we're seeing obviously is the rise of voice computing, Siri, Alexa, Hey Google, things like that. If your business does not have a digital presence, when we ask Alexa to find a business, it's not going to find you. So that's a really important aspect of a digital strategy, is not just the website, but it's where that website is pulling information, what other apps it's pulling it into. And other examples of that are in-app results such as Yelp, mapping, as we showed earlier with the Google Maps example, but there's other examples there of mapping apps that pull in from the web. And of course, the word of mouth example that I gave earlier. So the basic point here is that websites are not just about like a desktop search or even a mobile search. It's about how that information is aggregated across multiple digital touch points. And this is a really interesting point here, which is that 1/3 of Canadians say they don't trust a business without a website. So a website really gives your business a legitimacy, even if you don't sell anything from it. It makes it feel real. It makes it feel official. Rich, I know you deal with customers all the time at Shopify who are potentially starting up a website for the first time, or maybe they're migrating onto a digital platform after being in the physical space. What is your view about the trust aspect that having a website or having a digital presence adds to a business?
Yeah, I mean, to touch on your point, I think that, it really does help to legitimize the business itself. I think that, back in the day and age, especially now that everyone's kind of pivoting to an online, more digital approach, I think, business cards used to be a great thing. But again, I mean, I don't know how many business cards you've collected over the years, but they tend to get lost or whatever the case might be. So like you said, when it kind of comes to your memory, if you're able to type that into Google and pull up a search result with a really nice looking website, it just adds to kind of the trust factor that you build right without even having to go into a store with a customer, or having your customers be in store, or attending your business, or whatever the case might be. So yeah, the legitimacy part I think is really, really important to highlight there for sure.
Yeah, and that applies even if your business has no digital sales whatsoever or no e-commerce. For me, I know if I get my hair cut or if I get a massage, there's no digital transaction involved there. It's all in the store or at the location. But having a website is the way that I both discover that business, but it also provides that trust aspect that makes me know that, no, this is an ongoing business. It's doing, it's legitimate, it's successful, and it really adds that level of legitimacy to a business. So next, we're going to talk about how does your website fit into your digital strategy. And so we ran a survey recently, and we asked businesses what were the most important tools that they used to help their businesses succeed online, and the digital tools that they used. And these were some of the examples that we asked them about. And I'm curious what everyone thinks the ranking of these would be in terms of what people chose. So the answers come in percentages, but don't worry about that. I'm just curious what everyone thinks would be 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. If you want to type that in the chat or just write what you think the number one would be, that would be great, and we'll reveal the results in a minute. Okay, a couple votes for a website, a couple for Facebook, 1 for LinkedIn. Okay. Oh, LinkedIn for 2. Okay. Interesting. Website. So the funny thing is this, I'll wait a few more. Depends on the industry, Facebook. So we're getting it's a lot of sort of Facebook or social media and then website. The funny thing is this is a trick question. The actual number 1 response was mobile phone. Which I debated taking out of here, but it's actually funny because I think when people responded, they think mobile phone, but obviously the mobile phone is like really just a physical hub of all of these digital tools. So basically website, LinkedIn, Facebook, all of those things run through your mobile phone. And as everyone knows, you can run a business off a mobile phone these days, but website was number 2. And so I think that's a win as much as possible for a website. It was really close. But as you can see, Facebook was up there, but 22% was not a huge response. LinkedIn was 19%. So you can see that, when we asked businesses what their most preferred tool was, a website was way up at the top, and it was a critical element of their digital footprint. And so for us, what we really want to talk about is how a website is the hub of your digital strategy. Everything you do. So we don't want to disparage any of these tactics. Facebook is important. LinkedIn is important. Paid advertising is important. SEO is important. PR, events, influencer marketing, all of these things are important. But none of these things are hubs in of themselves. They're the spokes, and everything drives back to your website. And so, PR, the idea there, you're looking to get media coverage, and you're looking to drive people back to your website. Events, same thing. You're looking to drive people back to your website to convert or to get more information. Paid advertising, same deal. Influencer marketing, if you have people who are doing influencer marketing for you on LinkedIn or on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, the goal there is to drive them back to your website. So it really is the hub of that digital platform. And the issue with some of these, the spokes in this equation are that other platforms like social media, they're great and they're helpful and they're super useful, but they're closed platforms and they don't provide the flexibility to run your business. What you're looking for is an accessible platform that everyone has access to. And believe it or not, as much as Facebook has a lot of users, not everyone is on Facebook. And of course, I'm sure everyone's seen the media. There's all kinds of troubles in Facebook land these days that are leading people to either stay on the platform or potentially not engage as much. So you want to be on a platform that's accessible to as many people as possible. And the web is the most accessible platform there is, because anybody with a browser can type in your website and go there. And so it's important to recognize that all of these tactics need to be driving both attention, brand value, and traffic back to your website. And that is the case even if you have a physical business, because in the cases of a physical business, you want people to be able to go and learn about your business there so that they then come in and make a sale. Rich, I'm curious, as again, you help businesses all the time starting up a new digital presence. How many of these types of tactics do you see people who are exclusively relying, like maybe only on email marketing or maybe only on social media, and are coming to you for the first time saying, I've been running this off YouTube for 3 years and now all of a sudden I need a website? Do you see that a lot?
Absolutely. And I think the more importance that's being placed on having a digital presence, it's become very evident that from a business perspective, branding is huge in being able to kind of convey your message and acquire or reach the demographic that you're looking for. So, as wonderful as, outlets like Facebook and Instagram, all of that's wonderful, but there is that element of branding that's still missing. So the website, again, like you said, being the hub really allows you to direct people and control the way that your business is perceived. And, historically, when you think of business and the way that it used to take place, it was reliant on square footage and a physical retail location in order to kind of attract the demographic immediately around you. So it's less about serendipity now, and it's more about strategy and actually being able to reach out and, do business not just immediately where you are. So from a commerce perspective, it's really wonderful because now you're not relying on a busy intersection or, seasonal advantages. You can now use all of these other spokes that you've mentioned to start acquiring a demographic that isn't just in your immediate neighborhood. So it's really become a really powerful tool, this website, where, it's not just necessarily a business card, but it's a place of business as well. So absolutely, I see these as complementary facets to the actual website itself. And now people are starting to realize that and taking a leap into, online businesses, website development and stuff like that through Shopify, which is a wonderful thing to be a part of.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, another major factor driving this adoption. And again, I think it's interesting for someone who works in a digital space, I'm sure is the same with you, Rich. I think I still sometimes I'm taken aback by how many people don't have a website because, for guys like you and me, it's commonplace. But there are a lot of businesses out there that legitimately, they just haven't needed it until now. It's not been something they've thought about. But one factor that's really changed all that, unfortunately, is COVID-19. And, that's what we're going to talk about next is how has COVID-19 impacted business? And so, I think obviously there's been a lot of negative impacts to COVID-19 and no one wants to downplay what a bad situation this is. But I think one of the sort of silver linings, if you will, is how this is forcing a lot of businesses to be more aware of their digital strategy and how important it is to their business. And so what we're seeing is that businesses are pivoting to digital. They are building a digital presence for the first time in some cases. Sometimes they're adding to their existing digital offering by adding e-commerce. And then other times they're pivoting to completely new digital models. And we see that in situations where, for example, a restaurant is adding curbside pickup. Well, previously they didn't need a website with an e-commerce element to it. All they needed was a static menu, but now they want people to be able to order online and pick up in person. Or in some cases do skip the dishes or some of those other platforms. So we're seeing both completely new models, but we're also seeing people adapt a digital model onto their existing business. And so both of those are really interesting developments that have been spurred on by COVID-19 and unfortunately by the lockdowns and things like that. And But I think that the good news is that those are good business strategies to have in the first place, and most of them are probably going to be sticky long term. And a really interesting sort of side note on this is obviously I represent .ca, and it'd be interesting to know that .ca saw record monthly domain registrations in the first 3 months of this year. So I should say the first 3 months of our fiscal year, which was March through to May, which, as everyone knows, was the height of the lockdown. And so what we saw was registrations of CAs skyrocketed as a ton of businesses moved online. And so it's really been a force that has helped really accelerate that digital transition. So we have some great success stories that we have made note of. There's a business called the nextsip.ca, which is a BC-based business that helps small cafes sell their beans online. CanadaSews.ca, which is a movement of volunteers providing fabric masks to frontline workers. Best Bacon is an Ottawa-based bacon delivery service, which is probably the best business ever created. Artwork.ca is an e-commerce space for artists to host their creations. So this is a really interesting one. So obviously a lot of artists are reliant on shows and displaying their work to sell their business. And this business actually developed sort of an online way for artists to both display and sell their art digitally. And then the last one is neighborhoodcoffee.ca, which is a Toronto-based cafe that started right in the middle of the pandemic, which I think a lot of people would have suggested probably wasn't a great idea. And they really pivoted to digital right away by starting to sell their beans online, but also by embracing other local businesses to sell complementary products online through their shop. And so it's a great example. All of these businesses were started in the middle of the pandemic. So it just goes to show how the digital platforms and websites really are an opportunity to even take advantage of a situation that is unfortunate, where a lot of businesses are struggling, and have that ability to still keep business and maintain things. So again, we did that survey, and we asked businesses, what are you doing during COVID-19 that you may have done, that you may be doing differently from what you did before? So what tactics are you developing that or deploying that you didn't before? And so we found that 14% are relying more on social media. 13% are adding more content to their website. 12% are promoting their Canadian ownership, which is a huge one for the buy local and the shop local movement, which I know has been very popular both before but also during the COVID situation. And obviously that reflects heavily in the great.ca registration numbers we saw earlier, is the importance of local and buying local. And improving their e-commerce position was another one. And Rich, it's interesting. I know early on in the pandemic, Shopify launched their new mobile app, and there's a buy local element in that I know I've used a couple times already. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So initially what it started out as was a streamlined way, because obviously the presence of online shopping during the pandemic, skyrocketed. So initially what it started out as was a way for you to track all of your packages in one spot. But essentially what it's turned into now is, well, there's two different initiatives here where essentially every merchant that opts in to utilize what is called Shop Pay is now discoverable. So now this app not only allows you to track all of your packages from multiple outlets in one spot, but it also, based on your buying behavior, will start to recommend other products from other businesses. So it's become another sales channel for people to expand their reach to their customers, where that wasn't a thing before. So definitely been a powerful, powerful tool for merchants where, again, they've expanded their reach without having to expand the amount of workflow or effort they've had to put into it. It's just become complementary to what they're already doing. So that's just one of many, many tools now that are really helping to what I like to refer to as future-proofing a business. So when you're talking about, pivoting to online, I think that whether or not you have a presence now, through the pandemic, we found that merchants who did pivot to online were able to recuperate a lot of the funds that have otherwise been missed, or a lot of the revenue, I should say, that would have otherwise been missed had they just been relying on that physical retail location that was forced to close during everything. So the Shop Pay app is an incredible, and Shop itself is an incredible way to, again, expand your reach to another channel, one of those extra spokes outside from the website.
I really like, I used it a couple times, and I know it taps into your GPS on your phone, and they can recommend businesses in your local area, which I thought was really great. We look at those points: promote Canadian ownership and improve e-commerce. And this is one thing that sort of combined the two of them. And I know for Mother's Day, I bought some gifts for my wife here locally in Ottawa, and all of the products that I bought were from companies that previously didn't sell online, had shifted to add digital platforms to their businesses, and all of them were Shopify, ironically. And then I was able to use the app and then pick up in person. And so it's a great way to both combine the power of digital and the power of e-commerce with the support for local and the support for physical businesses online. So I just thought that was a really great example of how local physical businesses with retail presences can adopt digital in a way that is really true to their brand and true to who they are as small businesses. And I just thought, obviously COVID being the catalyst for that is not ideal, but it was a really great thing to see.
Well, and I think another thing to be said, like, when you are a small business, I think that we're finding now that the merchants that we see adopting an online presence now are either reluctant or a little bit hesitant, if not even intimidated by, the whole process or idea of what that looks like to pivot to a digital platform. But like you said, I mean, if you don't have that presence, I mean, there's no way to get that sale, right? So yeah. I think that being able to be supported by something that makes the transition really easy and a little bit less intimidating is where we're finding like these beautiful success stories, these businesses that were like, I don't know why I'm waiting or why I waited until now to make this transition, but I'm so happy that I did. So I love you called that out for sure.
Awesome. So I'm sure there's probably some people watching right now who have listened to everything that we've said up to this point, but who are just saying, okay, that's great, but I still don't need a website. Like I like to think I'm pretty persuasive, but it probably hasn't worked up to this point. So that's fair. You don't think you need a website. So, why do you think that a business would need a website? I'm curious if anybody in the chat wants to respond. Can you give me some examples of a business that wouldn't need a website? Okay, security issue. I'd be curious to know more about this, what that means, security issue. Privacy. Criminals. Yeah, criminals should probably not have a website. That's probably the best answer.
That's an excellent answer.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Criminals should not have a website. Maria says it's necessary, but many see it as a complex and time-consuming process. We're going to get into that, Maria. That's coming up in a minute. But yeah, like that is a common thing that we hear is just it's too hard or it's too expensive. I don't have the time. So we'll just go in. So again, we did a survey, and so 44% said it was because they rely on word of mouth or referrals. So I have a small business. I get all the business I need. I don't need a website. People know me. I'm Gary the shoe guy or whatever, right? Like that's a good chunk of what we saw as the responses for not needing a website. Some say their business is too small, it costs too much, and they rely primarily on social media. And so there were some other responses, but these were the sort of the big ones that we pulled out from the survey. And so, yeah, I mean, these are all common reasons that we hear. And we had a couple of people who gave us comments. And so this person said, I have an established client base that commits to long-term contracts in a very niche sector. And they're in a technical services realm. And then someone else said, I don't have the margins to add the expenses of website design and maintenance, nor do I have the equipment and expertise to photograph products. And that person's in retail. So I'm sure Rich is going to have something to say to that person in a minute. And so yeah, I mean, these are the types of things we hear, and they're very fair comments. So let's tackle a few of them. So I don't sell online. My business is 100% in person. So this is your referral guy. Like this is your person who just says, I know all my customers. I have all the customers I need. I don't need any more. And that's great. But websites are not just for selling online, as we talked about earlier. Websites are an easy point of contact. It gives your phone number, your address, and things like that. It lists your product and services, menus, product lists, services offered, things like that. It's a great reference for existing customers and fans to recommend your business. Again, go back to my, you're at a party example. Someone says, hey, you should check out Joe the Shoe Guy. And then I get home and I forget, was it Joe or Jim? I forget. But if I go in and type in the Shoe Guy, Ottawa, and Joe pops up, now all of a sudden I found your business, right? And then the last would be business development and partnership opportunities. Let's say Joe the Shoe Guy, Nike's calling and they want to partner with you. Well, if they can't find you, that partnership is now down the drain. And so, it's a great example of how, even someone with a really sort of physical business that relies a lot on repeat business and word of mouth, it's an important tool to have because your business, your website is your business card. And so Rich was mentioning business cards earlier. Imagine you did have a business card and this is all it said. It was a plain card and it just said your email address on it, annasbananas.ca. And I said that just to see if I would trip over it during this presentation. Well, here's the powerful thing about that is that one line now tells people who you are, what your website is, your Twitter and Instagram handle, and your email all in one. And so it's just a really great way to aggregate all of that information in one spot. And, and again, even if you don't have a business card, if you're at that party and you just say, oh, what's your business? annasbananas.ca. Now all of a sudden, I don't need your phone number. I don't need your Twitter handle. I don't need your email. All I need to know is what to Google later on. And even if I spell it wrong, if you set up your website properly, I'm going to find you. So that's that one. Next, I don't need a website. I have a Facebook page. I'm going to be honest. This one kind of bothers me. This is personal to me. And so this, and the reason why is I see this, I see it a lot with restaurants for some reason. Restaurants will have a Facebook page and they'll post a PDF of their menu. And it just breaks my heart because I want to eat that sushi, but I feel really bad because you're posting on a Facebook page. It is not a good experience for the user. And so, I always say, don't build your business on Facebook. Oh, look at that typo. Don't build your business on Facebook and don't put a typo in your presentation. Why not? You don't control or own the platform. It's just super, super important. You do not control that platform. The content is restricted. Facebook, as everyone, one of the reasons Facebook took over the world is because it had a really restricted template. It beat MySpace. MySpace was known for being able to throw anything at the wall and have flashing cats and GIFs and all this kind of stuff. Facebook is a very curated experience. There's only certain things you can do with it. And of course, they've expanded that functionality over time, but it is very restricted in the content you can put on there. Algorithms change. The problem with the Facebook algorithm is they could decide to change it tomorrow, and all of a sudden your business could be out of luck. And more importantly, business models change. So as I'm sure everyone saw, there was a time about 6 or 7 years ago where you could get all the traffic you wanted with only organic. You could post something organically and get all the traffic you wanted. And now you pretty much have to pay. And that's because Facebook changed their business model. And now all of a sudden that business model requires advertising to succeed. And for all we know, they could change it again tomorrow. The business model could change at any moment. And the last one, social media can be problematic. And I mean, we won't get into the issues that Facebook is facing right now, but the bottom line there is that any social media platform that you don't own or control, just think about people who built their businesses on TikTok right now. They're problematic and they are subject to anything happening at any time. And so we don't want to just call out Facebook. This applies to any platform that you don't control. So social media, I just talked about TikTok. I mean, imagine if you had built a 6-figure TikTok business and they're out there who've built those businesses. And all of a sudden, Donald Trump has just crushed your business because he blocked the app in North America. There are horror stories, many, many horror stories about Instagram influencers who've had their accounts hacked, about YouTube influencers who have had their videos demonetized. So you do not have 100% control over those platforms. Another great example is crowdfunding platforms. Obviously, places like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, they're great. And this is not to put any of these platforms down. It's to say that you can't rely on them exclusively. So if you're on Kickstarter, Indiegogo, you should always also have a landing page. And a lot of the best Kickstarters that you see will have a landing page that they'll refer people to. And that does two things. One, it gives you opportunity to sort of build your own audience outside of the Kickstarter or the Indiegogo platform, but it also gives the ability to add more information. So you may be having a Kickstarter, but you may already have 7 other existing products. Well, you can actually get ancillary sales by driving people to that landing page. So even if you are using a crowdfunding platform, it's important to have a website because you don't control or own the platform. The one thing I always kind of like to make the comparison, if you don't, and of course I'm biased here, but if the platform doesn't have a domain name that you control, that you own, it's not really your platform. And so that's why all the best platforms have the ability to add a custom domain name so that then you control that, because a domain name is portable. You can take it, you can bring it anywhere. So owning and controlling that platform is huge. And of course, if you lose your account, you lose your business. So that is, we've seen Instagram influencers who've been hacked and their accounts have been taken away from them. And sometimes they get them back, but it can take months to go through that process of getting back a hacked account. And so at least if you have a website that your followers know about, you can have that audience that knows you and knows a platform that you control and where they can always reach you. So we're going to talk a little bit about the benefits of a website. Again, it's a platform you control. It's just really, really critical that you have a platform that you control from end to end. And I know that applies whether it is something you build from scratch, if you know HTML or whatever, and we'll get into that in a minute, or if it's something like Shopify, where Shopify provides a lot of great tools that businesses can use to build their platform, and then you can put the custom domain on top, and now you control that platform, you control that experience. It's accessible to anyone. Again, you don't have to have an account. So on Facebook, on Instagram, on these platforms, you need an account. There's no account needed to go onto a website. You just type it in a browser and go. Helps with SEO. For those who don't know what SEO means, stands for search engine optimization. It's basically how Google finds you. And it adds legitimacy to your website. And so, as you can see here, we got an example of a local bakery here in Ottawa. And, it's great. And platforms like Google have been increasingly adding what they call these rich snippets or rich results, where they add, not that rich, the other rich, where they add more detail to their platforms, so you can get directions and find out these things. But if you notice down at the bottom, Wildoat has their own website listed as well, and that provides someone with the ability to get more information than just what Google is showing you. Rich, did you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of the controllability of it, I think that's a huge portion. And you made some really great points in terms of the amount of businesses that start on these social platforms, that it's just a very volatile kind of, approach to take, because like you said, at any moment it can kind of disappear. So I think that, again, just by having a website, I was going to say this is the perfect example of a digital footprint, or like a digital business card. You're searched on Google, all of the information is then populated into this one spot. So whatever you need, if you need the address, if you need, like right here, even place an order on UberEats.com, like it's so integrated now that it's not so much that, you don't need a website, but it's like, look at how easy it is to access all of the information that you need, that not having a website just seems like, I don't know, it seems like more work or more damage to the business than anything, right? So this is a great example for sure.
Yeah, it really is that hub, right? So none of this is meant to say you shouldn't be on social, or you shouldn't be on Uber Eats, or you shouldn't be on Indiegogo. Those are all great, but as long as they are spokes that lead back to your website as the hub, that's the critical part. And you're right, Rich. This snippet here is a perfect example of how this is one of the spokes. Like this is I believe this is actually a Google Maps a sidebar, but this could apply to a Google search as well. And this is one of the spokes, search engine optimization or mapping optimization, but it leads back to your primary platform. So that's really important. I'm just a little bit conscious of the time, so I'm going to move on to talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts. We had a question on that earlier about just how complex it is, time consuming and expensive. So how do you build a website? Now, obviously, I'm not going to build a website right for you right now, but we're going to talk a little bit about, just maybe to demystify it a little bit. But building a website is expensive, right? Like it's a lot of money. And, the thing is that, we held again, the same survey that I talked about earlier, and we asked people how much they think a typical business website cost. And the average response was a little over $1,000. And the answer there is it actually depends on the complexity, depends on what you're building. But it can be significantly less than $1,000. And it doesn't need to be a lot of money for it to be effective. So I want to talk a little bit about some examples. Are you building a blog? So here's a great example of a blog. This is socialdad.ca, great online influencer, does a lot of partnerships and things like that. A lot of blogs are free or very close to it. Platforms like Blogger, platforms like WordPress.org, .com. I always confuse the two. Have a lot of free blogging platforms out there that can get you started in a really free and easy way. And of course, if you're running a business, you say, well, why do I need a blog? Obviously, this is an example of someone who runs their business off social media. This is an influencer who does brand partnerships, but blogging is a great way to draw people to your business through your expertise. It's really about showing your expertise and demonstrating that you know your business. This example here is a business card, and I decided to put up my own website here because, why not? And so again, this is the business card example that I showed you guys earlier. I just have a really basic, primarily text website. I actually built this myself using a template, these can be free, and many registrars have these services available to them, depending on what registrar you use. There's often a business card style landing page you can put up with just your name and your basic contact information. And even something as simple as that is an important digital tool. If that's all you can do, it's better than nothing. And then of course we have e-commerce, and this is actually one of the websites I bought something for my wife on for Mother's Day, bougieandbirdie.ca. And this is a Shopify site again. And it's e-commerce. And again, we talked earlier about over $1,000 a month. Shopify is as little as $30 to $50 a month, depending on what you're doing. And, I think that, there's obviously transaction fees, and maybe Rich, you can walk us through that a little bit more. But the bottom line here is that this is not a lot of money. I mean, I think, Rich, you talked earlier about how before, when you had to start a business, you need to talk about square footage, you need to talk about rent. Imagine what a business 30 years ago would have said to $30, $50 a month for their rent on their store, right? I think they would have laughed and said, that's crazy. I'm paying 10 times that. And so if you think about that $30 to $50 as the rent for your store, as the rent for the square footage you have digitally, how many extra sales would you have to make in order to make that up? Probably not too many if you have the right business model. I don't know, Rich, you want to add a little color onto this?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, if you think about way back when, let's say that first website that you showed an example of back in 2002, I think that the idea of an online presence was very daunting, simply because it was like, I either need to hire a web developer, I need to, I have no HTML or coding experience. So like, if you needed to have a website, that meant you had to employ someone or pay someone to make any small changes that you needed. Before I worked with Shopify I've been with them for 3.5 years. I was a hairdresser myself, and I knew really little to nothing about e-commerce. So I was just as intimidated. And it really is to a point now where they give you the tools and the templates that you need to be able to log in, and from a very intuitive approach, be able to build something that looks exactly like this example within a few hours. So again, when you think about that $30 to $50 a month versus the thousands of dollars that it used to cost before, and eliminating the structure of overhead and staff and bricks and mortar location, hydro and all that stuff, $30 to $50 a month is wild to me when you think about it, especially depending on what you're selling. Like if you look at the cost of these accessories here, that's like two sales, and you're paying for your entire business for a month. So it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it's quite the transformation, and companies like Shopify have really obviously helped drive that transformation, and it's a great opportunity. It's literally, again, we talk about COVID and all the negative impacts, but there's never been a better time right now to start a digital, an e-commerce business. There's a really great opportunity. So talk a little bit about some other options. I don't want to downplay how great WordPress can be. 65% of all websites online are run off WordPress. And the great thing about WordPress, if you're building a more complex website, is there are a lot of great plugins you can use for things like appointment booking or for e-commerce, for other types of things that you need to add to that. It can be a little more complicated for beginners, but it's really not beyond anyone's scope to get out and learn that if you wanted to. Custom HTML, that site that I showed you that I built, it's really just pretty basic HTML. Is it a skill that you pick up overnight? No, but it's not a handy skill to learn. And then there's also platforms, if you're running a startup, platforms like Bootstrap are really popular amongst startups for getting up and running pretty quickly. Bootstrap has a lot of sort of pre-built code in the background that you add and customize. But in a lot of these cases, you may want to consider hiring someone. But it really depends on what the importance is of your business and how much of digital plays into that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. And what about a domain? So I got to put these slides in here. So we asked the same 500 people, how much does a domain name registration cost? And the average response was $150, which was way off. An average domain name is $50 to $20 a year. And so I just want to go back again to what I talked about domain names. The great thing about a domain name, a custom domain name, is it is portable. You can point it at your Shopify site. You can point it at your Kickstarter page. You can point it anywhere you want. You can redirect it. It's one thing that you can own over time that you can use to identify your business no matter where it goes or no matter how big it grows. And so $15 to $20 a year is a pretty small cost for something that is that valuable to your online brand. I know, Rich, you talked earlier about the value of branding. That domain name is a huge factor in your branding because it's how people find you online. And, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this, which is what domain name should you get? And so again, we asked 500 businesses what domain name they would get. And you can see a little bit of a win here for CA. What the interesting number I find here is if you look at the 2016 number underneath, CA is actually growing in terms of its relative importance to .com. And I think that really goes back to that buy local aspect and the importance of buying local and how, digital and e-commerce used to signal global. It used to be all about global and, Amazon and all these big companies, but digital doesn't have to mean global. Digital can mean local. And I think that's what we're seeing here. And we're seeing Canadians embracing local like never before. And so it's just a really good thing to see. But of course, you can buy both. And to be honest, if you're building a business that is looking to be global, multinational, you really want to have a multi-domain strategy. And I know Shopify actually recently released better support for multi-domain and multi-country localization, both in language and in domains. I believe it was at Shopify Unite back in the spring, Rich.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, now you're able to curate just through the domain itself, the experience that your customers are going to see when they go to your website, whether it's the currency that they're purchasing in, the language that they're reading the website in. So it really helps to localize. And I think that one of our biggest strategies over the last, couple of years has been really that effort to localize businesses to your customers. Because and to give you just a little bit more context in that front, certain payment options, for example, aren't as popular in places like Germany or Singapore as they are in Canada or the US. So you're really able to tailor that experience again, where before with one physical location, you kind of rely on, your windows for branding, or, there's kind of that one experience that you get, that singular experience. Whereas now it feels like they're shopping locally, even if they're shopping from across the pond, right? So huge opportunity there to reach a much broader demographic and tailor it to them.
Absolutely. And I have two questions here in the chat. Both are pretty similar about what are the differences between a CA and a .com. And I think, the important thing to suggest here is that if your business is Canadian and primarily targeting Canadian customers, .ca is the answer. And that's not just me saying it. We have buckets full of data that backs that up. And the main reason there is because if I say to you, .ca, it literally means Canada. It's what we call the country code top level domain for Canada. It represents Canada. If I say, joetheshoeguy.ca, you know that Joe is in Canada, you know that he ships in Canada, you know he charges in Canadian dollars, and you know there's no customs or duties when you buy from Joe. .com stands for commercial, and it is a very, obviously, as I'm sure everyone knows, it's a globally accepted domain name that applies to a lot of huge brands. So my suggestion would always be, I think that the best way to make the decision is, if your business sells primarily to Canadians, either exclusively or primarily, .ca is your decision. If your business sells globally or in more than one country, you should go with a multi-domain strategy that includes .com globally and .ca for Canadian customers. So that's, we had a couple questions on that.
And one other question on that as well, Spencer. Is there a risk if you do buy a .ca domain and somebody else buys the .com? What are the rules around sort of competition around domains? What should people be looking out for in making sure that they're retaining a specific domain name or title?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a couple things there. The one thing is that, obviously .com is global, and there's 8 billion people on the planet. I think that's 7, 8, something like that. Whereas .ca is Canadian, there's only like 40 million of us. So if you just do the math, there's actually far more .cas available than there are .coms. So if you go to register a .com, Joe the shoe guy is probably taken. Sorry, Joe. And so buying a .ca is not only a way to get the better, shorter, and of course, shorter is always better when it comes to remembering names. .ca is not only a better way to get a shorter, more memorable name, but often it's the only way. That being said, I would always recommend, for what we call brand protection, I would always recommend, actually it goes both ways. If you want to lead with .com, that's great. If you happen to have a name that you can find, I would recommend you buy the .ca for what we call brand protection, so that no one else can take it. And the same would apply the other way, that if you have the .ca, you buy the .com. That being said, you're always going to have an easier time finding a name on .ca, because there's only 40 million of us, than you are on .com. And so, I think that is an important, when it comes to branding, it's an important thing to think about. So I want to talk a little bit about ROI. So, again, we talked before about, how many extra sales would you need to make to get an extra $30 or $50 a month, right? So you obviously got to take your additional sales. You got to think about the costs that, so that $30 to $50, you got to think about your expenses. But overall, you're trying to figure out if the incremental sales that you've added are worth more than the extra money that you've spent. And I think in virtually all cases, even for our word of mouth person, that is going to be a positive. It's going to be a yes. And of course, that's not even talking about all the other values to having a website. We talk a lot about lifetime value of a new customer, right? So when a customer buys from you once, we don't want them to just buy once. We want them to buy multiple times. And so a website helps with that equation for two reasons. One, it provides a hub for them to always stay in contact with you when they're online or when they're in a digital environment. And two, you can use it to nurture those customers long-term through things like email marketing and drip marketing and things like that. You can also use it for sales support and customer service. So if people have problems with your product, they can email you, or they can send a message to your website. So the ROI is not just in the incremental sales, it's also in all of the future sales you're going to gain by having that online presence that is going to add to the value of your business.
And just to touch on that as well, I mean, if you think about the amount of time you would spend managing all of this manually from a word of mouth perspective, however you're doing it normally, what is your time worth is really the question. And how much of that time will you buy back by digitizing or automating a lot of what you're doing manually right now? And I think that a website has become a catalyst in driving that effort while buying you back that time. Once it's set up, you now have something that is working for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as opposed to just when you decide to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the whole sales support and customer support part of it. Having an FAQ that you can send people to with common questions as opposed to them calling you all the time, I think is invaluable. So that's a really great point, Rich. Okay, fine. I'm not technical. There's no way I could build one myself, right? And so this is a question that we get quite a bit as well. Should you DIY or hire? And I think this is both. Building a website is easier than it ever has been, but it also makes this equation a lot more complicated. So you need to think about things like, how complex does it need to be? So is it a business card site like I showed you earlier? You probably build that yourself. Do you need enhanced functionality with like a appointment booking and other types of things? Maybe a customer portal login and all that. You may need to hire someone. Although I know a lot of platforms have different support for those things. How much time do you have? I mean, obviously, if you don't have a lot of time, you probably should just hire someone if you need to get it up and running quickly. How much do you want to spend? Obviously a big question. That goes back to the thing we saw earlier about, my business is too small. Well, if your business is super small, you probably don't want to spend very much, which means you should go for building it yourself. What's your appetite for learning? I don't want to downplay things like learning HTML and CSS are within the grasp of pretty much anybody who wants to sit down and spend a few hours diving into it. I'm not a technical person. I'm not a developer, but I basically taught myself basic HTML and CSS, and it's been a super helpful skill to learn. How critical is your site to your business? Now, obviously, if your business is e-commerce, then you need a website. If it's just a business card site, as we talked about earlier, well, then you could probably build that yourself without a lot of hassle. And finally, is how much customization do you want? This applies to both features, but also to design, right? So there's all kinds of options out there. Platforms like Shopify don't necessarily have all the customization, or if they do, they require you to code. And I know Shopify has the ability to go in and modify CSS and things like that. But I know Shopify also has a really vibrant community that builds themes and designs websites. So there's sort of both of those aspects to that. I don't know if you want to jump in on that, Rich.
Yeah, I think, again, like you said, you can really choose how complex you want to make it. I mean, Shopify is a beautiful platform because, like I said, like if I can manage to navigate a Shopify website, honestly, anybody can. So, we've got really great out of the box templates that allow it to be quite simple to just upload some products and start selling really quickly. If you want to start integrating things like appointment booking solutions, a live chat function, all of these things are customizable through the Shopify App Store. So you can really tailor these out-of-the-box themes and kind of customize them to the needs of your actual business. And then if you want to take it a step further than that, we do have an experts marketplace where you can then actually hire developers to go into your store and really give you that more granular customization ability. But again, if you're just getting started or if you're a corporation, it is just as simple, depending on the resources that you tap into.
Right. And just one final tip, and again, it's never been easier to do this, but just remember, if you are hiring someone else to build your website for you, always register the domain yourself. And that is super important because if a developer or a web designer registers your domain for you, we've heard all kinds of horror stories about how that can go badly. Always control that domain because it's the most important element of the brand identity of your business. So I know we're running a little short on time. So again, we're talking about some tools. We're talking about WordPress. We're talking about Shopify, Squarespace, Wix. GoDaddy has a website builder. There's just so many tools out there. I know this slide hurts Rich to see it, but I just really want to show everyone that it's never been easier to have a digital platform and to have a website. And there's just so many tools out there that are available. Things to consider when you're building a website. Content strategy. You need to keep the content fresh and updated. Do you want to hire for that? Can you do it yourself? It doesn't need to be overwhelming. You don't need to keep updated every day or necessarily even every week, but you need to make sure that it's updated and frequently refreshed for your customers. SEO is something that, again, you could learn on your own. There's lots of plugins. I know Shopify has plugins for SEO, as do other platforms, but that's something that you may want to consider doing some outsourced work for. Product photography. We had this question earlier in the chat, I believe, about product photography, or maybe it was before the webinar. Obviously you can pay someone for product photography, but I think it's actually super easy to do really great product photography with an iPhone, with a modern smartphone. Go on Amazon and Google mobile light box, a thing called a light box. It's basically like a white box that you buy, and if you have, in fact, that Bougie and Birdie site that we saw earlier, it wouldn't surprise me if they used it. And basically it operates as almost like a giant flash that helps illuminate your pictures. And those things cost like $20, $30, and you can do really great product photography with that. Advanced web development. Again, this is if you need like really advanced functionality that maybe a website builder or something like that doesn't apply for. And then security. This is a big one. If I had to leave you with one thing for security, it would be get an SSL certificate. An SSL certificate is critical to your business. And the good news is that platforms like Shopify already supply those. But if you're building a website on a platform or building it yourself, an SSL certificate is critical. And also remember two-factor authentication. I don't know if I'm pretty sure Shopify has two-factor authentication for its platform, but absolutely make sure you turn that on, because again, if you don't want anybody getting access to your website because it is your business. So again, we're running short on time, so I'm going through these a little bit quickly. Conclusion, yeah, your website is the hub of your digital strategy. COVID-19 is shifting all business online one way or another. Don't build your business on Facebook. And building a website is cheaper and easier than you think. It really is. And again, platforms like Shopify have really, in a lot of ways, democratized this ability to build an online platform. Everyone who's here will be getting this deck. So, those are clickable hyperlinks. So don't tap the screen. It's not going to do anything, but everyone who gets this deck, you can click through. These are some great resources. We'll send these out via email as well, about domain name costs, about how to choose a domain name. And that graphic that you saw about how to build should you build a website yourself or pay someone to do it? There's a whole blog post on that that outlines some of the tips and tricks for that. This is me. If anyone wants to follow up, my email, my website, my Twitter. If you have any questions, feel free to follow up. I can stick around for a little bit and answer questions in the chat. I'm not sure what the plan is, if we can do that or not. And yeah, thanks for being here. And Rich, thanks so much for helping out. I don't know if you want to add anything at the end here.
Yeah, I mean, just to summarize, I think that, of course I'm coming from Shopify, but I think the tools that you listed, I think, like you said, it's really just about demystifying. It doesn't have to be with Shopify. It doesn't have to be with Wix. It doesn't have to be with WordPress. As long as you realize the inherent value of just even having that small snippet of information available online, honestly, I can testify and say that I have seen many merchants who are now just taking the leap, and they're like, why did it take me so long to do this? So whether you're selling something, whether you're a dentist, whether you're a hairdresser, whatever the case might be, just simply starting with, a baby step is invaluable to your business. So I'm so happy that I was able to shed some light and hopefully, make the process seem a little bit daunting, but yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rich. I'm just looking at the chat here. It says, what industry is showing increased need to create a website? I mean, I think, the food service industry, restaurants are a big one that I've seen just adopting digital in a big way. As I said, I used to see a lot of Facebook restaurants on Facebook exclusively. I've even seen some that are exclusively on Instagram, which sort of boggles my mind because Instagram has even fewer options to customize content. And I think a lot of those are moving to digital models, whether it be to do curbside pickup or whether to add things like Skip the Dishes or Uber Eats, things like that. Rich, are there tools to migrate a website to Shopify?
Absolutely. So depending on the complexity of the migration that you're looking to do, there are a lot of resources that we do offer through our app store, and also just using certain types of files that you can then use to import into Shopify. So the process is quite streamlined, but it would just really depend on the type of content you're looking to import and the size of the content that you're looking to move over. But yes, absolutely, there are a bunch of tools.
Great. Okay. And then we have one other question in the Q&A. Does my simple website have to be AODA compliant in Ontario?
Oh, wow. So that's a tricky question. So I guess the short answer is yes. AODA is the Accessibility Act here in Ontario. There's actually some new rules coming into place. Oh man, my web developer, Mike, would shoot me for not remembering the date, but it's soon, about accessibility. The good news is that most website building platforms would have that built in, and Rich could probably speak to that a little bit more, but basically what that means, the short answer is, so, for example, if you're blind, an AODA certified website would have the ability to use a screen reader to read the content to you. So there's different things that are applicable to those guidelines, but most of the website builders would probably have that built in, but it's definitely something you should be aware of. That being said, the AODA guidelines have been in place for quite a few years now, and enforcement has been pretty lax up to this point. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. You absolutely should, but it is definitely something to be aware of.
Yeah, from an accessibility standpoint, I mean, there have been instances where, again, just from a brand perspective, if you are able to accommodate everyone and not just a certain niche demographic, when you think about people who have visual impairments, for example, the types of colors that you're using on your screen or the contrast between those are very, very important. So, whether or not it's enforced, I think that as any business, whether you have a physical location that allows people with wheelchairs to access, it should be the exact same kind of standard for online to make sure that you're reaching everyone equally.
Yeah, and actually this would be a really good topic for a separate webinar, because I've seen some really great information on accessibility and what it means. And it doesn't just mean It doesn't just mean someone with a permanent disability or a full-time disability. Like imagine, you've just had eye surgery, and so like there's all kinds of ways in which accessibility benefits everyone, not just people who may be, disabled or permanently in a disability situation. It benefits everyone, and it, like you said, Rich, it just opens up your audience to that much more people that can then do business with you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Spencer and Rich. That I certainly learned a lot, and the packaging of this presentation, all of the various components that were covered, I think were really helpful, particularly to those that are starting up, feeling like this might be a daunting process. I think you hopefully feel very equipped to tackle your web development. So thank you so much to CIRA for making this webinar possible. Thank you to Rich for supporting us and giving us the perspective from Shopify. Thank you to all of our attendees. Quick reminder, we will be sending through the slide information in a follow-up email, which also includes Spencer's contact info if you have additional questions to ask after. But have a wonderful rest of your afternoon or morning, depending where you are across Canada, and thanks for tuning in. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.